Cibola Beacon article. Missing persons report filed. Body removed from grave in Fence Lake area. By Donald Jaramillo, February 13, 2016. Cibola County. Late last week, the Beacon learned of a missing persons report filed on 6 Cibola County residents, a mother and her 5 children. Brian Miller of Santa Fe reported to officials recently that he has been unable to contact his wife, Stacy, and their 5 children. Miller said he saw his family last nearly 2 years ago at the Aggressive Christianity Group headquarters near Fence Lake on State Road 36. After several calls and interviews with different parties involved, the county sheriff's office learned that Stacy and 4 of her children were currently in another county in southern New Mexico in good health. They also learned that Enoch, the Miller's first child who was born in the Aggressive Christianity headquarters, had died 2 years ago. However, because there was no paperwork available on Enoch, there was no way to confirming his death besides digging up the young boy's grave and positively identifying the body and possibly solving the missing person case. According to Sheriff Tony Mace, a warrant was issued last week to gain access to the inside of the group's headquarters operated by James and Deborah Green. The Greens are cooperating with the investigation thus far, said Mace. It is a death investigation on a missing person, and that is how we are handling the case at this point. We don't know what will come of any of this until an autopsy is performed and DNA testing is done on the body removed. Early Tuesday, the Greens, along with other members of the Christian group, directed the officials to Enoch's grave site. Late Tuesday, and after many hours of digging nearly 6 feet deep, a small body was removed from the site and was immediately taken to OMI offices in Albuquerque. The State Police Crime Scene Unit was on site to remove the body. There was also a representative from UNM's archaeological team on site during the body removal. We are looking for positive identification of Enoch, said Mace, and his cause of death. In good faith of the Greens, the body removed is that of Enoch's. The sheriff noted that Det. Stephen Chavez is the lead investigator for the ongoing investigation and that his Uda sheriff is also very involved in the missing person case. Our staff has been persistent in assisting Mr. Miller in finding his family, and hopefully, soon we will have correct information on his son's death, said Sheriff Mace. According to reports, Brian was asked to leave the Greens compound several years ago after being part of it for nearly 17 years. A sheriff's office report states that his name in the Aggressive Christianity headquarters was Paul River. According to county records, the Greens purchased their property near Fence Lake they call their compound for $550,000 in 1997. Prior to that, the organization was based in California. Ironically, while deputies were investigating the missing persons case in mid-January, on the 14th day of the month 2 women called the sheriff's office early in the day wanting to escape from the Greens compound. Later that evening, 2 women and a child were picked up at approximately 7:30 p.m. by 2 deputies. According to incident report, one of the women is a wife of the Greens' son. When asked about the 2 women, Mace said the women were returned to their families safely and the investigation is ongoing.
Response from Battle Cry Sounding News. Dear editor and reporter Donald Jaramillo, this letter is written in response to an article which appeared in your paper, the Cibola Beacon, on February 13, 2016. In such article you mentioned that a missing persons report was filed by Brian Miller of Santa Fe, New Mexico regarding his family he reports as missing. The reality is that Mr. Miller is a deadbeat dad, and gave no contact nor support to his family for 2.5 years after he walked out of the residence of Generals James and Deborah Green after they sought to get him to seek medical help for a genetic medical condition that was reported to the Greens by his biological family. Mr. Miller left after several physical assaults on other much older residents. When the Greens talked with Brian and his wife, he refused to seek medical help and refused to return to his biological family, even though the Greens asked him to repeatedly, and offered to buy him a ticket. He went to Grants, New Mexico, where he did not consult with the Cibola County Sheriff's Office at that time if he was concerned with the conditions of his deserted family. From reports later given to the Greens, he stayed in Grants for approximately 3 weeks before moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico. He has not, to date, sought medical attention for the condition which is known as Huntington's disease and has a wide variety of symptoms and can easily be resident in his 4 remaining children. He did not make attempts to contact his wife or children prior to his report to the Cibola County Sheriff's Office that they were missing. He is the one who has been missing from their lives and left his wife and children stranded at the Greens' home and offered no means of support to them during that time, either financial, medical, emotional or spiritual. Mrs. Miller was left at the charity of the Greens and others until she relocated in September to her new home in New Mexico. She and her children are doing well and are thankful to be out of the reach of Mr. Miller's lies and intimidation. Mrs. Miller is frightened of her former husband, as he is verbally abusive and has even threatened her with physical violence with a knife. The Greens gave to the Cibola County Sheriff's Office, Lieutenant Harry Hall, a video recording of the interview between the Greens and Mr. Miller on the day he walked out of the Greens' residence. To this date, not one of the parties who have questioned the Greens from the Cibola County Sheriff's Office has admitted to watching the video in which Mr. Miller confesses that he is a liar and a thief and also uses manipulation and intimidation on others to get his way. In other words, Mr. Miller confesses to having a very questionable character, yet the Cibola County Sheriff's Office is refusing to consider that in this situation. Secondarily, in your report you mentioned that 2 women escaped from the compound and were given a ride by 2 deputies and returned to their families. Joshua Green, son of the Greens, reported to the Cibola County Sheriff's after waiting to see if Jamie Bridgewater would give him a call or send a letter regarding their son, Ezekiel Honesty Green. To date, she has not made any contact and has committed what some states evaluate as parental kidnapping. The 1-year-old child was reported missing to Detective Steven Chavez on Friday, February 5. Mr. Chavez failed to advise the Greens that he knew of the woman's escape and denied any knowledge of the child's whereabouts. Are the Cibola County Sheriffs aiding and abetting parental kidnapping and child abduction? Furthermore, the Sheriff's Office claims these women were turned over to their families. The one woman, An Cu, age 33, is the daughter of Vietnamese refugees. She claims her biological father would murder her if she were returned to her parental home in Orlando, Florida, where she lived as a long-term homeless person. Up until the time she initially contacted the Greens, she lived in her wheelchair, which she left at the Greens' residence. Her chair was urine-soaked and filthy at the time she came to the Greens' home. At the time An Cu arrived at the Greens' residence, which was approximately 2.5 years ago, she was wheelchair-bound and had to be lifted physically from her chair, and through nourishing diet, rest, and assisted living care, lots of love and prayers, given freely by the Greens and other residents, she gained strength in her legs enough to ambulate with the assistance of crutches which were given to her free of charge by the Greens. She has no income and has proudly stated she did not need her Social Security pension, which she stopped getting years before in Florida. She retold of her street life, many nights in rain, wind, etc., oftentimes not eating for 2 or 3 days, and not able to reach a bathroom in time as she lived on the streets. The other woman, Jamie Bridgewater, an alien from St. Kitts Island in the Caribbean, was living in Brooklyn, New York. She had been through Hurricane Sandy and was frightened and alone, or so she claimed. At the time she left her job and apartment there to join the Greens in New Mexico. She later pleaded and begged the Greens' son to marry her, declaring that God demanded her to be with him. It was later disclosed by Jamie Bridgewater that she owed upwards of $100,000 in personal debts of which the Greens initially had no knowledge. Did she use them as a hideout from her debts in New York? Both women had extensive correspondence with the Greens prior to coming to New Mexico, and both were aware that the Greens had been persecuted by a lying messenger of former years, Maura Schmeierer of California, who has made it her lifelong vendetta to destroy the Greens. The Greens believe that the two women received advice from Mrs. Schmeierer as to how to effectuate the escape, implying they were held captive, with the help of the Sheriff's Department. The Greens also believe that the two women claiming to escape are wanting to become famous from their now negative identity with the Green family, as has Maura Schmeierer, who has made a fortune off of lies and slander about the Greens. However, no one needs to escape from the Greens' home, as the front of the property is open to the highway and the only gate is a cable which can easily be stepped over or ducked under. Incidentally, the Greens regularly offer to buy tickets out for anyone who is discontented at the residence. If indeed the child in question has been turned over to Ms. Bridgewater's family, that means that the child was illegally smuggled out of America without a U.S. passport and without permission of his biological father. Mr. Joshua Green, the father of the child in question, had no knowledge of Ms. Bridgewater's leaving until informed by his parents the next morning, as he was out of town on a trip. So now is the sheriff's office involved in illegal international transport of a child who is an American citizen? The two women in question did not escape, as they were allowed internet and phone privileges, whereby calling the Cibola County sheriffs from the Greens' private phone located in their home, of which there are 3 extensions. The Greens report that they often left Ms. Bridgewater home alone, where she had full access to phones, internet, and their private quarters, and that she is suspected of stealing money and other possessions from the Greens. James and Deborah Green report that they are shocked that the Cibola County Sheriff's Office hid the existence of the whereabouts of their grandchild, and were advised there was nothing they, the sheriffs, could do. So, Mr. Miller is given great credibility because he walked out on his family, deserting his own children and leaving them and his wife penniless. And then Mr. Joshua Green, grieving over his baby, is advised that the Cibola County Sheriff's Department can do nothing for him, when they have aided the parental kidnapping of the baby in question, and possibly assisted in international child smuggling and trafficking. The Greens are absolutely appalled and shocked at the apparent negligence of the Cibola County Sheriff's Office, as they state that they have faithfully paid property taxes in Cibola County since the mid-90s, and that Mr. Miller has contributed nothing to the county whatsoever, and he is being treated as royalty, and the Greens are scorned. The Greens are aware that there is an ongoing investigation regarding the death of Enoch, Mr. Miller's oldest child, who died presumably of the flu during the epidemic of 2014. Mrs. Miller, in following her husband's pattern of no medical help, chose not to take the child to medical facilities, although the Greens repeatedly asked her to consider such action. Mrs. Stacy Miller, during that time, had no funding whatsoever from her husband, no medical insurance, and no transportation of her own. She tried to care for her son and thought he was getting better, when he took a turn for the worse and died unexpectedly. She requested that his remains be buried in the Greens' private cemetery, where others who have died are legally buried. Due to the mental and emotional distress that Stacy was under at the time, the Greens agreed to allow Enoch's remains to be buried at the marked grave site, where investigators exhumed his body on Tuesday, February 9, 2016, with full cooperation from the Greens. Joshua Green has been left completely in the dark regarding his own year-old son, as the Cibola County Sheriff's Department has apparently assisted Ms. Bridgewater in not only parentally kidnapping Joshua's only son, but also removing him from the country by illegal means. The Greens can easily be contacted via email or telephone and are in perplexity as to why there are so many lies, half-truths, false accusations, and ongoing failure to investigate these matters. Baby Ezekiel. Baby Ezekiel.jpg. Jamie Bridgewater. JamieBridgewater.jpg. GENERALS-AZ@aggressivechristianity.net. 505-788-2228.
Everybody down, we gonna pump, pump, rock up. Know your enemy, beat your enemy down. Stand up, face up, everybody down, lock up.